Boa tarde. Eu gostaria muito de poder falar todo o tempo português, mas a minha proficiência na língua é muito limitada. Somente para dizer que amo o português e que amo algumas palavras particularmente que têm um contenido incrível. Que, por exemplo, como você disse, essa saudade é uma palavra musical que não existe em nenhuma outra língua. Então, agora vou ficar para inglês, tá bem? Okay, thank you. That was my Portuguese. But I think I have enough Portuguese to survive and to meet my friends. But it was really funny because I used to report to Brazil when I was working in my previous life with Oxford University Press, and now that I am working with the British Council again, but I used to come very often to Brazil and always enjoy. But the moment we were going to start with business, for whatever reason, the Brazilians and the Colombian would begin to speak in English. That is interesting. There will be some moments where I will ask the translators to stop translating, and that is for a reason, because I have a little exercise that is practical. I am managing 2 research groups. The first research group is in Colombia, and it has to do with teacher training with a foundation of coaching, which is interesting. And the second one started a few hours ago to try to find out what happened with my plenary session. But then we will investigate. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to take you through something that was initially planned as a plenary, but is written in the program as a workshop. So I will try to cover both sides if it's okay with you, all right? So there will be a lot of narrative, a lot of information as I move through the slides, and then we're gonna get practical. I need to tell you first of all that I'm going to summarize the probably 15 or 16 years of history of Colombia, particularly in language learning. And the numbers there include these specific dates. In the first ones in 2000, we produced a book that was with the Foundations for Curriculum. And what I want to emphasize is that in that foundation we included all the theoretical considerations for curriculum and for language learning. So we talked about Wilkins' notional and syllables, and we talked about every possible thing, the communicative approach, and then we talked about Dr. Himes and Bachman and various people, and that appeared in this first document, the one in 2000. We sent it out with the hope that this would influence whatever was going to happen with language learning in Colombia, and language teaching for that matter. Surprise, nothing happened, of course, because the audience for that material was limited, and normally they were not in the schools, in the public schools. They were mainly in the universities. So we went through the second one, which was in 2006. But before 2006, I want to tell you that something really interesting happened in Colombia. The British Council organized the launch of a book that was commissioned to David Gradle. For those of you who have read David Gradle's work, he basically talks about the future. He is not a Nostradamus, but he does use a lot of relevant demographic data, social data, economic data to try to predict what is going to happen. So he was commissioned with 2 books. The first one was called The History of, it was The Future of English, and the second one was called English Next. In English Next, we had a huge launch of the book in Colombia for many reasons. And it is that in Colombia, we wanted to explore language learning from yet another perspective. And that perspective was one that Gradle presents when he says that out of 5 people who speak English in the world, only 2 are native speakers. You must have noticed that I am a native speaker of Spanish, and a very proud one. And I want to mention this because when the first time I took a proficiency examination, many years ago, it was the ALIGU, a test developed by the University of Georgetown. And when I finished, they gave me a certificate that said that I was 87% native. I must confess that being young at that time, I was very happy to see that. But now, if somebody says, you sound like a native, I would immediately ask, a native from where, and excuse me. And then they say, well, maybe it's more American than British. And I say, okay, American from where, and excuse me. And then they might say it's probably from the southern part of the United States. And I say, where? I say, probably San Antonio, Texas, that area. Good. What level of education? Because, you know, the point that I want to make is that the world has changed dramatically. 2 weeks ago, we had an event in Bogota with Dr. Rod Ellis, and he said that he didn't really believe, I mean, he understood the idea of the global language, but he didn't understand this idea that you had to learn like an international language, that nonsense didn't exist. Well, that nonsense is used in 75% of all the exchanges of information in the world. 75% of all the exchanges of information in the world happen between or amongst people whose native language is not English. That is, Ricardo speaking in English to my friends in Brazil, and vice versa. And that tells us something, because then this discussion that we had for many years in the 80s and 90s about EFL or ESL, is English a foreign language in Brazil? Is English a foreign language in Colombia? With this new vision of English as a lingua franca, I can tell you that the issue of ownership of the language has changed dramatically. And no longer can we talk about British or American standards. We are more, and therefore we can establish the standard. And if it doesn't really matter if Ricardo may have a very heavy Colombian accent, as you may have noticed. But the point here is that I changed the concept of the native speaker into one of intelligibility. So we brought that exactly here in 2004 and 2005, when the country was about to begin to launch a new language policy. And the new language policy said that all Colombians should have the right, and this is important, the right to learn English. And the word English appeared for the first time, because before it was any foreign language, but this time was English, in such a way that this person can have, or this citizen can have, three things. First, he or she can talk about our own culture, findings, etc. to the world. Second, that we could participate in processes of globalization in general. And the third one is that we would be able to understand different cultures. And it had a little subtitle in the objective. And the objective was related with competitiveness. And it said that if you want to be competitive in this world, you should be able to use English. But then, the definition of competitiveness was presented, and the definition was the ability to attract and retain valuable people. So Colombia, going through one of the most difficult moments in our history, fighting against drug trafficking, etc., began a very interesting campaign so that we could tell the world our history and the world can listen to us. But at the same time, we began to change the issue of the ownership of the language. So English is my language as it is your language. Then, with the Guía 22, what happens is that we did a study, and when I say we, it's the British Council has been very active in the past 25 years directly with the Ministry of Education, helping them with policy making. And as a result of that intervention, we reviewed different possibilities of first describing what a language user would look like. For example, I would go to Universidad Santiago de Cali and talk to somebody and say, what is your level of English? And this person would say, I think I'm an upper intermediate. And then I'll go to somebody else and say, no, I think I am very proficient in English. And then I would go to somebody else and say, well, you know, I think that I have an advanced level. But if you could compare the levels, you couldn't really tell what was going on. There was no unity in the way we wanted to name or to describe those levels. It is in that context where we began to study different frameworks, including the Australia, New Zealand, one from Canada, another one from TESOL in the US, etc. And we found the common European framework. And I agree in that it was created by the Council of Europe right after the World War, and the idea was to promote languages, not only English. That's why the Council of Europe has descriptions for over 14 different languages. And we found a lot of commonalities, some political, some social, dealing with the roles of mobility, the importance of securing local languages, and the importance of being able to communicate with other languages. But one of the elements that was essential in the whole search was the idea that we could have a unified way to call the levels of English. And that was the descriptors of A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. And as irrelevant as that might sound, that set the basis for the things that have been happening in Colombia non-stop in the last 15 years now. I would like to tell you that the Guía 22 is but a translation into the Colombian context of the can-do statements. And that was for two reasons. Reason number one, because the can-do statements can be very general. And reason number two, because they are written for adult speakers. And we were dealing with children. So we decided to begin to work with this Guía 22, and the result was a booklet that was written in Spanish. I mean, people said, why on earth are you describing the can-do statements in Spanish? And of course the answer is because that's not only for the teachers, it is also for the students, for the parents, and for the community at large. So, interesting move, because we produce this beautiful cartilla that actually you can download from the website of the Ministry of Education. And it is written, of course, in Spanish, with very clear descriptions of what students should be able to do in grades 1, 2, and 3 as a group, and then 4, 5, and 6, and so on and so forth. And we run a baseline study using, at that time, a test that was online. And we visited around 350 schools, and we investigated what the levels of students was and the levels of teachers were. And we found something interesting. The first thing that we found was that yes, it was true, most of the teachers of English in the public sector were in A2. Only 24% of students were in B1, and only 4% was in B2. And when we review in a moment what that means, you will see that that was a dramatic situation. But what was most interesting is that when comparing the levels with those of the students, we discovered, or let's say we proved, that what the level that students achieve will invariably be one lower than that of the teachers. So if the teacher is in B2, students will get to B1. If the teachers are in A2, students will be in A1, and so on and so forth. Another thing that we found was very little mobility in the teachers of English in the public sector. And that was a situation that really posed a lot of challenges, and that still presents a lot of challenges. One, because if they are protected by the unions, therefore if you want to assess or evaluate, immediately see that as a threat, therefore they don't accept visits. And number two, because those new students that are now participating and studying in the universities, coming out, graduating with excellent levels of English, very good knowledge of advanced methodology, don't have access into the system. So it is a dramatic situation, because those who can really generate the changes don't make it to the public sector. First, because as I told you, it is a system where if you want to stop teaching, you have to die. And I mean, So only when a teacher dies or retires, you get a new person there. And the other thing that is more dramatic, and I don't know, but I think it deserves attention also in Brazil, is that most of the qualified teachers never make it to the public sector because they are absorbed by the market, meaning private institutes, private universities, etc., etc., etc. That is a cruel reality. And it's something that is very difficult to change because you would have to change the structure of salaries and the structure of the offer and demand laws. So it will be very, very difficult. By the way, I forgot to say that if I'm speaking too fast, please let me know. You can also do that. I had a friend who used to say something that I think was very politically incorrect. And he said, if I'm speaking too fast, please think faster. That's okay. And then, of course, what I call this presentation is how do you really move from something that is written in the Constitution into what we have nowadays. And that's basically what I'm going to try to explore in moving from a little bit of history that I gave you and the challenges that we have faced and what has happened since then, okay? I also am aware that this is a difficult hour, so that's why I will introduce a little bit of jokes. But being very serious about the presentation. Okay, so let me just talk about the idea of the derechos básicos de aprendizagem. When you get to this point, the situation is the following. La Ley General de Educación, the General Education Act, says that all the schools in all the municipalities have the autonomy to decide how they want to organize their curricula in general, which implies that they have to present, the only thing that they have to submit is what they call the Proyecto Educativo Institucional, which is the PEI. And with that project, they put it together as PEI, Proyecto Educativo Institucional, they get the approval to continue. But if you think about then what is the role of the Ministry of Education? In Colombia, the Ministry of Education has only two roles. The first one is set the policy, set the standards, and then measure the policy, measure the standards. Whatever happens in between is the direct responsibility of local authorities and the institutions themselves. Very nice, ideal in a way when you have a very strong body of people working in curriculum, which is not necessarily the case. So you can imagine the situation. So in order to combat that, we produced the Guía 22, and the Guía 22 with the can-do statements didn't do much, because people will read something like, the student will be able to talk about his or her family and family relations. So I tell you that, and immediately you begin to think of, well, how can I translate that into content activities in the classroom? But when you go beyond these things, you say, well, really, anything would match into that description, anything. We needed not only to think about English, we needed to go beyond that because we were also planning to teach values, citizenship, earth protection, etc. in the curriculum. So it was like, put this can-do statement, then add the content, and then match with these requirements, and then make it work in the classroom. Very difficult to do. So a nice idea was the creation of something that was called the Derechos Básicos de Aprendizaje, which is the basic learning rights. And the idea here was to change the conception. I, as the Minister of Education, I cannot force you to teach this or that, but I'll tell you, your students have these rights. And I'm going to illustrate these rights in this way. They were written initially for the 6th and 11th grades. They talk about the communicative skills for every grade. They also have examples of what the students can do in the language classroom. So it was not only saying, I can speak about my family, but I will also tell you, look, this is an example. This is the function, this is probably the structure, this is the vocabulary, and these are the things that you could consider from the point of view of citizenship. For example, if you found in a higher level the verb, the modal auxiliary can, you wouldn't say, oh yeah, can is one of the modal auxiliaries, can, could, may, might, shall, should, ought to. Sorry, it's okay. Okay. But the point here is, how can I associate that initially with a function? So what is the main use of can? Many people think that it is to talk about someone's ability to do something, but after Michael McCarthy's review of corpus, he demonstrated that actually the most common use of can is to talk about things you can do, for example, possibilities, like when you are in Sao Paulo, you can visit the Museu da Cidade de Sao Paulo. See? That is how can is used. Now, can we take that beyond that and tell the kid that when he or she is learning can, you're also teaching respect? You're also giving them tools to ask for permission. Excuse me, can I open the window? Can I leave? And those kinds of things. So that was the experiment there. And additional to that, we also provided the teachers with materials that they could, additional materials that they could adapt to their situations. And curriculum sugerido, the suggested curriculum, complements this. And that, so we are basically talking about two things. First is the derechos básicos de aprendizaje, and the second thing is currículo sugerido. I am going to do this. I am the Minister of Education. Here you have the Guía 22. It has very nice presentation of the can-do statements. But now you have the derechos básicos de aprendizaje, and with that you will see in real practice examples of how you can transform into content and valuable activities for English and for life. And then I will provide you with something that we call the suggested curriculum. Okay? So the suggested curriculum is basically a scope and sequence, but it transforms the things that I mentioned before into practical activities considering areas of language learning, citizenship, and protection of the earth. All right. As you can see, it has the contents for every year and the objectives. You also have the planning, conteúdo plano super ciclo académico, so that all the teachers should know what should be covered by when. And of course, more information as to how to organize projects, plans, and activities in the classroom per module. So we're giving them the complete vision. Here's something I want to say. If you think about the educational background and the experience of teachers, the more experience you have amongst teachers, the least detailed the curriculum should be. That is ideal, because you're granting some kind of autonomy. But when you have teachers whose level of English is very poor and whose methodological background is not so strong, the pedagogical background, you get to a point where you can actually think about a recipe-like curriculum. And that is basically what we did. But we clarified to teachers that if they felt that they had enough tools to survive with one extreme or the other, they should choose what was more convenient to them. Okay? So far, so good? Okay. So that's basically the process. But what I would like to do today with you is to show you how we moved from one concept of the Common European Framework and how we began to translate that into what you do in the classroom. And we discovered that one of the things that we needed to do was not only to train the teachers, but also to accompany the teachers for longer periods so that they could internalize and begin to use whatever we needed them to use in the classroom. That's why you can see here that I hope you can't read. Oh no, that's not what I mean. I hope you can read, but if you don't read that, it's totally, because I just want to show you that the rationale behind this showed us something that was mentioned yesterday by Professor Hines, and it's how many hours do you need to get from one level to another? And it was a very relevant question, because we said, technically speaking, if we have 3 hours a week and we start in grade 1 and then you get to 11th grade, you should have 11 times. I studied languages for a reason, you know. I didn't. So this, basically it was around 500 hours. So apparently the magical solution was, oh, the CFR mentions that with this number of hours you should be in B2 or probably more. Is that the reality that we have in Colombia? So that's why my comment in the presentation was, yes, but it's not only the number of hours, it's also what happens in those hours. But it's also not only what happens in those hours, but the real conditions that we have in the classroom. 45 students, not comfortable tables, no access to internet, etc., 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 etc. But we said, why don't we try to do this in a realistic way, in 2 different ways. First, with this concept that English is not the property of the UK or the US or any other country for that matter, but it is the property of the world. And now that we have changed the perspective of the native speaker as the norm, and we want people just to be able to communicate with anybody at the level that would be enough for not only for survival, but will be beyond, why don't we aim at something that will be both challenging and realistic? And in reviewing the documentation, we noticed that basically what we wanted to do was taking the high school students, the last level, to B1. Easier, of course, said than done, because as you may remember, A1 and A2 are different in the whole description, because they call it basic user, and the reason why they call them basic user is because there is a sense of dependence. I depend on you. So if you're kind enough to speak slower, followed by then you understand. And then that dependence is what marks an A1, A2. So you run the risk of being misunderstood. Sometimes people who are very patient and culturally aware will be kind enough and say, what you mean is this and that. They will help you. That would be basically people in this A1 and A2. In the B levels, B1 and B2, this word is absolutely important because we're talking about somebody who is independent. And I may make a lot of mistakes, and I'll show you in a moment. I can make a lot of mistakes, but you will bear with me. You say, oh, this guy, you know, he doesn't use the third singular person or must or whatever, but I understand what he or she means, okay? And of course, you get to these higher levels where there is necessarily a deeper understanding of cultural issues and what is convenient, what is right, what is wrong, when you use something. You can understand a joke and those kinds of things. Now, when we thought about this, so we divided A1, A2, basically up to here, in primary school A1 plus, and A2 in lower secondary, and B1 in the latest part of high school. Now, that is something that I thought was very realistic, and that we thought was going to work. I'll tell you the story in a moment of what really happened. I did this just to keep, some expectation. So, we're going to have a little case study, and as you may know, these descriptors that you saw are the general descriptors, but you find 5 more descriptors depending on the skill. As you may know, the Common European Framework doesn't talk about 4 skills, they talk about 5 skills, because they say that it's listening, reading, writing, and in speaking they have 2 categories, yes? One is oral production, like presentations, and the other one is interactions, that they divided them, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But I took here a case study with the A1, A2, B1, B2. So I'm going to read them for you, just to show you how you move from A1 to A2. A1 says, I can write a short, simple postcard, for example, sending holiday greetings. I can fill in forms with personal details, for example, entering my name, nationality, and address on a hotel registration form. So here I am, approaching the airport, and they give me the format for tourists, and it comes with Portuguese and English. And I say, asignatura, how do you call it, signature? So asignatura. So I'm making my predictions as asignatura. It's at the end. There is a line I should sign here. My level really, I mean, my official level in Portuguese, you know, I don't think, I mean, there should be a certificate in Portuñol, and then I can say that I have a new one. But since there isn't, that's how I But anyway, the point here is that I begin to make those things and I feel comfortable with that. Now, I can move to the next one. I can write short, simple notes and messages relating to matters in area of immediate need. I can write a very simple personal letter, for example, thanking someone for something. So it gives me ideas. Eu estou muito contente por estar aqui em Brasil. Eu tenho saudade de vocês. I can use my words there. But I begin to hesitate there, do you notice? And then I move to the next one. I can write simple connected text on topics which are familiar or of personal interest. I can write personal letters describing experiences and impressions. Thank you very much. That was my Portuguese. I would have to look for a dictionary or ask, well, did you say this? Or just Google it and translate it. And I would, run risks, as you know, very difficult. And then the last one says I can write clear, detailed text on a wide range of subjects related to my interests, and I can write an essay or a report passing on information or giving reasons in support of against a particular point of view. I can write letters highlighting the personal significance of events and experiences. So, for example, if I wanted to use my Portuguese to tell you all the positive things that I have learned here, believe me, I would be limited. It would be difficult for me to convey what I want to convey. So facing this, please try to keep in mind, I will go back to this in a moment. What I want to do is okay, what sort of evidence would you assign to each category, considering first, linguistic competence, social linguistic competence, and strategic competence. So for example, understanding that linguistic competence is what grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation things would I have to consider to do this or that? Or, moving on, what sort of social linguistic competence issues do I have to take into consideration? For example, if I say, "Oh, soy carioca, mi hermano," would that sound formal or informal? I know that I'm not carioca, but just but would that sound formal or informal? I don't know. If I talk to the dean of a university and say, "Oh, soy carioca, caro," you would say, "No, don't try." You don't say that in that context. Because that's beyond my understanding. And then, when you talk about strategic competence, connecting, keeping communication going, etc., which goes beyond the language per se, and getting into grounds that are very cultural. I notice, for example, that you say, sometimes in very informal communications, I will listen to people saying, so say, for example, do you have the microphone ready? And somebody said, "Ta," which is, I guess, también. It's ready, yeah? But then I tried to do the same with the gentleman who was my taxi driver yesterday from the airport to the hotel, and he said, "Nice try, but you're sounding a little bit ironical." Because he said, like, "Are you happy here?" And I said, and he said, like, "No, I don't think." See, but that's something that I would not be able to detect. Okay, so going back to the description that I have, let's take the first one. If I say, I can write short, simple postcard, for example, sending holiday greetings. Let's take that one, a postcard. So what sort of language, first of all, what sort of, if you want, what sort of grammar would I have to consider just for a postcard? Simple, present, present continuous maybe, yeah. Okay, then you would need some words to describe. You would need to know how to write the name of a place in that language or in your own language. Yes. Anything else you need there? Happy or not happy? Yeah, but that's as far as it goes. You see, and you're at the moment what you're doing is you're making those decisions. But look, remember, grammar is not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. So you say, okay, good, grammar is not enough, then what words? You say, well, words for descriptions, words for about places. Okay, good, so you have both. And then how do you pronounce it? I don't need them here because this is writing, okay? The second thing is, what sort of issues in linguistic competence do I need? So if I'm saying hola, or I say bon dia, I am showing different levels of formality. So you would need to consider that. So how would you present that to your students? Say, for example, greetings, and greetings for formal and informal. Exactly. And then you get into the connection of words and using however, even though, and my scale, the words that are going to help you put your ideas together. This is a very interesting task, because that's where we feel that we failed with our teachers when they receive the descriptions of the language. In other words, that can-do statements being translated into something real caused all sorts of difficulties, because people said, I cannot teach, this curriculum is very strange. And we said, the standards are not the curriculum, the standards are standards, and you have to interpret that with your reality and bring it down to earth to make decisions about what you want to teach. Wow, very interesting discussions. Like, for example, why should I teach this kid who lives in Leticia? Leticia, as you know, is our little part of the Amazonas. You have most of it, but we have a little fun. And Portuguese is spoken there, by the way. And Leticia, and they say, you know, you can't really do much with this. Should we teach you winter, spring, summer, or fall? As the Carol Kings of those, something like those. And then that's when you begin to make decisions. Is it, are you going I mean, this kid can go to the rest of the world one day. He should be taught that. So, going to this thing, so where would you classify the following excerpts that I brought for you into A1, A2, B1, B2? And my dear translators, if you can stop just for the next slide, thank you. Right. So, I'm going to read it for you. Do you need them? Okay, it's there. Okay, my name is Gina. I have 16 years. I am from Colombia. My favorite music is rock. My father is called Jose. He works in a factory. My mother is not working. She is in the house. She is a professional. I am studying English here for to improve to communicate, which is very common also in Portuguese, right? So okay, so where would you locate this person according to the description that we saw? A1, A2, B1, or B2? Good. All right. This is the difficult bit, because then making those decisions is what really matters. Okay. So here we have basically an A1 plus. It's not an A2, fully A2, but you can see isolation, but still I'm able to convey meaning. Okay. Let's have a look at this one. Ana Maria is spoiled. She always wants to do whatever she wants. In many occasions, she asks for permission through Sally, who acting like a bridge between their parents and their siblings. Nowadays, Ana Maria has no many responsibilities in her own, because many of these are for Sally. Ana Maria is very tender, and she likes to care her brother and give orders too. Ana and Juan David are so close, they do many things together. They are friends each other, but sometimes they fight too because of their toys, food, and love their parents. So which one do you think is wrong? That should be a B1. And notice that for us teachers, you feel uncomfortable saying this like B1. Yeah, because that's the thing. There are issues with the language, but yet you're able to convey very good meaning. And then when you compare this with a B2 or a B1 plus, it's interesting. I'm sorry. I don't prefer another explanation about the difference between siblings, because the explanation the author provides is very close to describe what happens in my family, as I'm going to point out. I am the oldest sibling in my family. My relationship with parents is, like this article elucidates, closer than my sister's, who is the youngest, and because of it, I am the one in whose my parents' expectations follow. But these circumstances produce some troubles too. The oldest child, who does not fulfill what his parents expect, would become a frustrated person. On the other hand, the youngest child would not be interested in achieving any goals due to his parents don't expect anything from it. That's interesting, because then you begin to trace some elements that lead you to believe that this person is eventually a B2. Some of those words very well. What? For example, words, vocabulary.
Yeah, all the other connectors.
Yes, and connectors, and words like sibling, and elucidate. Yes, okay. Yet we can find some minor problems. Okay, this is exactly what we went through, but of course only focused on A1, A2, and B1 only. And what we did was we did a series of workshops to train students and the teachers to see what it meant to be an A1, A2, B1, B2. But we didn't want to stop there because our whole plan, the secret plan, was reduced to 3 specific things. The 3 areas that we wanted to do was, first, know exactly what the level was. So are you an A1, A2? That was the first step. Are you a B1, B2? Ricardo, are you a C1 or a C2? I'll have to ask a native speaker or somebody to tell me. But really, I needed to know where I was, okay? Once you know what it looks like, in other words, once you can describe what this person A1, A2, B1, B2 looks like, or does with the language, the second thing we needed to do was, how can I translate that into learning objectives, then the content, and then put together the curriculum. And when you say, if I know how to describe the level, and I know what it takes to take you from one level to another, the next thing that we needed to do was to provide the elements for the assessment. So, I know how you look like, I know what it takes to take you there, and I will measure accordingly. Fighting to have those 3 elements in Colombia was quite a challenge. We began with the sending of the first part, which was the Cantus statements, translated to Guía 22. Then we worked on the translation of the Cantus statements into the curriculum sugerido, which is the suggested curriculum, and the basic learning rights. And now, with the recent implementation of the textbook that is for free for all the students in the public sector, this year we're distributing more than 150,000 books to all the students. That is accompanied with 2 more actions. Training for teachers on how to use the materials, and something that I don't know how it's going to end up, because that is being developed at the moment, which is a system to accompany teachers 4 times a year in their actual classroom. So we have, at the moment, 19 people visiting 350 schools, sitting down, observing the class, meeting with the teacher, and with the approach of coaching. In the coaching approach, I don't tell you what to do, I help you discover. With an approach like that, providing them the tools, providing them with online support, we expect something interesting is going to happen. And the reason why I want to finish it that way is so that you invite me next year and I'll tell you what happened. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Obrigado. Temos tempo para perguntas.
5 minutos.
Perfeito. Português, francês. Sim. Temos. Separado.
Vou falar em português, que é para você treinar seu português. Primeiro, parabéns pela experiência. Parece um projeto fascinante. Com certeza eu vou ler mais a respeito, para aprender também. E eu queria saber, essa questão de trabalhar, de pegar os can-do statements e transformá-los em objetivos de aprendizagem, se é uma coisa inédita no mundo, se você conhece outras experiências de outros países que usaram o framework para trabalhar especificamente com objetivos de aprendizagem, isso que eu queria saber.
Sim. Actually, there are 2 points of reference. Eu vou falar português. No, but I'm going to use English because and the reason is that there are 2 points of reference. The first one is that some publishers did take it seriously, and there are some that actually reviewed the Cantus statements and transformed that into a curriculum. Big danger is for the teachers to believe that the book is the curriculum. That is something that you should never accept. That's the first one. And the second one was something that was actually presented in Dr. Heinz's presentation, which is a document that is called Equals. That's E-A-Q-U-A-L-S, Equals, which is a document produced by an organization in charge of quality and the British Council. And what they did was they translated the can-do statements into the vocabulary that you needed, the structures that you needed, and some other topics that you needed. And it is a very nice point of reference. Equals, EA equals, EAQUALS equals. You find it in the website, and it's an amazing document. Obrigado. I avoided it, but no, I will try it. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you. You said that now you're coaching the teachers. Can you just let us know on which basis you do that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Coaching is something that appeared initially in sports, then it moved into business, and now it is present in education for a very simple reason. And it is the foundations of Scuola Nova really is coaching, which is helping the kids discover their potential. You don't do it, they do it. And the easiest model that you use with them is the GROW model. G-R-O-W. G for goals, R for reality, O for options, and W for will versus skill. So basically what you do in a session is first with the G, the goals is you sit with the teacher and you tell me, where do you see yourself? What do you want to achieve with this business? What do you want to improve? So it's important to detect that. And then the second thing is, what is your reality? For example, if the goal is to be a C2, and the reality is the person is an A2, then you need to set a series of options. And the options have to come from the teacher. Here's the little catch. You can lead or invite the teacher to reflect by providing them with the options. So you say, have you considered? Could you consider this? Is this a possibility? What would it look like if you did it this way? So you don't give the recipe, but you can elicit possibilities through questions. And then, exactly. And then at the end, with the W, which is will versus skill, is when you make a balance between how much you want, how motivated you are, what is the drive, the energy that is going to take you there, versus your
dreams.
Your dreams versus your skills. How much do you know now? How much can you do? Yeah, and that's basically the idea. If you combine this, and this is what we're doing, is a very simple model, where you do that, and then you combine that with SMART objectives, that's perfect. SMART as in specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So have a combination of those two elements, and you have people who can develop. And I just want to say something. Again, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. I want to say something. This is not something that I created. Coaching is something that is being developed now. But Wallace, who is Mr. Reflective Practice, mentioned that there are only two real good ways of taking teachers to develop. And they are collegiality, de habilidade de trabalhar com parceiros, collegiality, and reflection. So that's where we're heading to, okay? And I think that that's about the time. Yeah.
What about the book? You mentioned that you are going to distribute this free book.
Yes.
Who wrote the book? How, you know?
Well, that's an interesting thing because it will be, first, there's a printed version, but if somebody wants to download the PDFs and the audios, you can do it because it's for free, which means that that's going to happen in Colombia, but I'm sure that all the places will consider that. And then it will have a digital version too. So it's called English, Please, and if you find it in the website of the Ministry of Education, it should be complete online in 2 or 3 weeks. It's English, Please. Yeah.
When was it written in Colombia?
It was written in Colombia by Colombians, and then what the British Council did is that of course, we coordinated the local team, and then we sent it to the UK for edition and revision of a language and illustrations, and then we printed in Colombia. But it's for free. Okay. Good. It is always a pleasure to be here, and I am very happy that I did not complete my story so that I can make it to Sao Paulo tomorrow. Obrigado.